Welcome into Hold My Banner.
Yes,
Casey
sir.
Hudson with Ante Campbell. And you guys, it's here. We have a Boston Celtics trade. We're not sitting here talking about the if, ands, maybes, or buts. We're not pretending that we heard something down the pipeline, even though we have still heard that movements can take place. But more importantly, the official trade of Jrue Holiday to Portland.
Yeah.
That's where the shock came in for me, which we'll unpack here momentarily. In return, we get Anfernee Simons and 2 second-round picks. Now, before you get too excited, these 2 second-round picks are coming in the later years of 2029 and 2030.
Yeah.
That's always an interesting thing to say because it just feels like forever away if we even get there. But more importantly, trade talk solidified. Your initial thoughts. You were on the case. Ante Campbell.
Yeah. Before I give my initial thoughts, the NBA season is finally done, and the off season is rolling in, obviously.
Oh, yeah, that's true. We haven't had a chance to hang out since. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself.
Yes, the NBA season is over, but, you're right. Shams did report that the Boston Celtics have agreed, reportedly, in a trade for Jrue Holiday to Portland for Anfernee Simons and 2 second-round picks. Now, how I feel about this trade, off rip, my phone's blowing up. I was telling you that I was up last night when this
trade. As if you don't have to be up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right, when this trade went down, and I have a lot of friends who are reaching out to me, from my past life, my LA life, my friends now here in Boston, and family that I've made here in Boston, reaching out to me just to check on me because they know how hurt and distraught I am by seeing Jrue go.
Yeah.
I never wanted Jrue Holiday to get traded. I don't want JB to get traded. Those are the 2 guys that I've been standing on, being like,
that's true.
They need to be here in Boston, and I knew the Jrue was inevitable. So I knew it was coming, but Jrue Holiday, NBA champion here. Before we move on to talk about what he's going to do for Portland or what Anfernee going to do here, NBA champion here. Yeah. He came in. He immediately ingrained himself into the culture and didn't worry about being a guy, He won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks, being the second best player on that Milwaukee Bucks team during that run.
Yeah.
He didn't worry about any of that. He came in, he said, hey, JB, JT, this is your team, this is your show. Unlike what a Kyrie did. Obviously, they were a lot younger, back then. But he came in, unlike what even a guy that we've talked about, with Marcus Smart.
I knew you were going there, yeah.
With Marcus Smart, he didn't, ingratiate these guys and say, hey, this is your team, So Jrue came in and did that, and he was a star in his role. There were nights where he felt like he was the second best or third best player on this team because he was willing to be a veteran that was willing to lead these young guys to the promised land, and he did that, and I want to say thank you to him before we talk about anything else.
No, I actually appreciate you laying it out like that because the reality is we have been building up all of this topic of like a piece has to go. Who is it going to be? And it only alleviates a little bit of this financial restraint that the Boston Celtics are dealing with. But more importantly, we just weren't sure which veteran was going to be moved on from. Right. And you did make the case weeks ago to say, don't move past White, or you could move on from White, but you didn't care to move on from Holiday or Jaylen Brown. I'm quoting you correctly. Okay, yes. So laying out the foundation of what he did for this team and knowing your role, I think that's important because as we look for the Boston Celtics to continue making moves, George and I talked about it on Boston is Under the Chat this morning. Like, what I respect about the Boston Celtics is not trying to do anything too flashy at the moment. So that just lets you know that they're going to need other guys that are going to come in and know their role. They have superstars on this roster. You don't want to have any sort of conflict with divas or guys that are going to come in and not understand if they're going to be that number 1 guy, that number 2 guy, that number 3 guy. Yeah. They need a plug and play moving forward. And I think this trade kind of lets everyone know we're not blowing anything up. Is that an accurate take?
100%. They're not blowing anything up. I can tell you right now, everyone's going to ask, who is this Anfernee Simons kid? And, I've been knowing and paying attention to this kid since, we're going to talk about the draft later. Yep. Since draft day. This was the first kid in the new era to be drafted out of high school. He didn't go to college. He didn't play overseas during the year that he got drafted. He stayed at home and he worked on his game, and he got drafted out of high school by the Portland Trail Blazers. This kid can score the basketball. I mean, when you talk about somebody who can fill it up, he's a lot like the 2 guards that were his veterans growing up, Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. He can put it on your head quick. I watched and I looked at before we got into this episode. He had multiple seasons where his game high in threes was 9.
No.
So this is a guy who's multiple times has put 9 threes in a game, you know what I mean, throughout his career. So if you're asking for somebody who's going to come in and be able to score on nights when JB's working his way back,
right,
on nights where Derek White disappears, because we've seen those nights, but we haven't had to call him out, you know, because we had JB and JT, you know, on those nights when Peyton Pritchard isn't stepping up, you can be sure that this guy is going to be able to get to the bucket, make threes, and do a lot of things that Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla want their guys to do. So we got a great return.
100%, because the notes immediately when you start looking into this guy is basically Cliff Notes version, threes on threes on threes on threes on threes. And if anybody is trepidatious to be excited about that, what was half of the hype around the NBA Finals that we just saw close out? It was those key threes. It was those late moments of loading up on those threes, which was another note next to Simmons. It's his ability to kind of show up in those light moments. And that's something else that we kind of saw for the Boston Celtics, kind of fading out in that fourth quarter when you really need somebody to lay it up and it not just be Jason Tatum. It cannot be an isolated guy just landing these three-pointers. So that's what's encouraging about this trade for one. For two, it's also the fact that he's not overthinking the shot. Again, I'm going based off of notes here. He tries to be creative with the shooting opportunities. So you're also looking at somebody that's not going to be stale in moments that you're like, who's next up? And you needed 20-plus points to come in and add to this roster with JT being out, with there being question marks about Jaylen Brown and when we're going to start getting these numbers. And my favorite part about all of it is when I saw that he supposedly had a quote-unquote, ready for this, down season. He had a down season with 19-plus points on average. And dancing around that 5 assist column. So if he comes in here on humble shoulders, knowing his role, not afraid to try to dish it up with the assist here and there, but can load up in that point column, then you're looking at a guy who's going to plug and play perfectly. And as noted, he's a free agent next season, I believe it is. So 1-year deal. So there's a lot of wiggle room here and flexibility in terms of what you're getting, what he can bring to the roster now. And we're not blowing anything up. We're just seeing how we can just continue to tip the scale just enough to continue to be talked about.
Yeah, like you said, down season, 36% from three threes a game that he made. This kid is a guy offensively I'm not worried about at all. Him fitting in with JB, him fitting in with Derek White, him fitting in with whoever is going to be left on this team as we continue to go through trades, because more deals are coming for this Boston Celtics team. If he defensively can be,
a little bit better,
a tiny bit better. A tiny bit better. This is a team that could get scary, especially when we go on to talk about Kristaps Porzingis, who we're going to talk about here in a second, and trade packages for him, which also seems inevitable at this point. This team could be a team that could be a playoff team. I mean, we're talking about the Eastern Conference. They should be a playoff team, especially with JB coming back for the full entire season next year. They should be a playoff team after this deal. What I also like about this deal as a whole, and I'll talk more about Anfernee Simons in a second, is the 2 second-round picks. Because as we saw,
even though they feel far off into the distance. As we saw, second-round picks get some things done. You know what I mean, in the NBA as far as bargaining chips. It gives the opportunity for the Celtics. They don't need the second-round picks. They don't need to draft these kids. They need to be able to package those with players like a KP to make it more sweeten the deal.
Especially when KP had the off year that he had last year. That's
the mysterious illness.
His trade value is low. That's the honest truth right now. His trade value is low. So if you have those second picks and you know, some of the other picks that the Boston Celtics own that they won't be able to use or won't necessarily use, even when you look at Anton Watson was a second-round pick for the Celtics last year, and he got waived this year. You know what I mean? He's a good NBA. He could be a good NBA player, a good development pick for them, and they ended up waiving him before the season even came to a conclusion. So they're not needing second-round picks. They need guys who are ready right now, and that's why I like this as a whole.
Yeah, and kind of circling back to those 2 second-round picks, as you said, packaging that, saying that it helps sweeten the deal for KP is not us saying that KP is not of value. It's not saying that, like, he wasn't a key asset to this team. It's just like whenever you're looking for wiggle room financially, this is an easy and fast way to do so between injuries and a mystery illness and all the question marks. One question marks demotes you financially really fast in this business. Going back to Anfernee for a second, though, Now, I think I'm permitted one dramatic take every Hold My
Okay.
Banner,
Uh-oh.
or maybe each segment for Hold My Banner. I'm still deciding. But my take today is from what I was looking at, and then of course you got to check out, the highlights, because when you're like, this guy is like ridiculously sweaty on the threes,
Yeah.
how consistent is this? Well, a lot of the highlights that I'm seeing is his ability to rack up against Eastern Conference teams.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sweeten the bargain for us, being like, okay, we're getting a guy that can put up points, that's sweet with the three-pointer, but more importantly, has a tendency to just kind of go off on Eastern Conference teams, adding to the threat that the Boston Celtics want to be?
Yeah, it definitely does. This is a guy that rises to the moment. He always does
Love
it.
that.
You have to understand, once again, C.J. McCollum, Damian Lillard, those were his vets. Those were the guys who were teaching them. If there's one thing that I can personify those three dudes that I'm talking about, it's clutch and the willingness to take and make the big shot in big moments, you
True.
know? So this kid is going to love going to places like New York and playing in MSG. He's going to get 2 opportunities to do that this year.
Yeah.
And he's going to have an opportunity to make a name for himself going into a contract year. Nothing's decided. There's been no extension offer to him yet. The deal's not even done as we're sitting
I know.
here, right?
This is true.
But, he has an opportunity going into a contract year to make a name for himself as a bona fide star in this league, and he will have the opportunities to do that. So he's going to take advantage of playing against them, to play against Cleveland. And they're a team that's tasked as one of these all-time teams. They were number 1 in the East last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's going to salivate at the moments to play against Giannis. You know what I mean? 4 times this
True.
year. He's going to get those opportunities to play against some of the NBA's best this year, and he's going to step up to those opportunities. I did want to note, too, we're talking about the threes. This kid is an amazing playmaker. Like you said, floating around 5 assists a game. He's also athletic, like super athletic. He won the NBA dunk contest, which I feel like most people forget.
Nobody talks about.
Because, like most people during this trade were asleep. Most people are also typically sleep during the NBA slam dunk competition as well. But this kid can fly, you know what I'm saying? So you get the opportunity for him to up fake, go to the rim. He might be putting some people on some posters. I've seen him do it before, and wouldn't be surprised to see him do it in green.
Okay, so then adding to that, we can see some flying and some floaters. But what about, did I see a really high note on his free throw percentage?
Yes.
His ability to capitalize on those moments. And how many star caliber players did we see this season where the game came down to if he only would have made a handful of those free throws, then this team would have been looking at a different positioning. They
Yeah.
would have been looking at coming out with a win versus a loss. So that's, all of these small things that add to the totality of somebody who can be a little bit more of a, I don't want to call him a complete package because the defensive side of things, but somebody who can add slotting in with your 30-plus point scorer out of the mix.
100%. I mean, the last 4 years he floated around 90% from the free throw line. That's elite.
That's wild.
That's what we call elite.
Yeah.
It's the problem about getting there with him. You know what I mean? Because he is so three hungry. He is hunting those threes. As he's gotten to become a better and better three-point shooter, I know we said he had a struggling, down year last year, but as he's become a better shooter, he's kind of gotten away from the things that could get him to the free throw line, getting downhill, you know what I mean? And the NBA's changed, the pace and space. Chauncey Billups being his coach is definitely a pace and space minded kind of guy. We have to be able to get shots up and make shots and take clean shots. And then, he had a DeAndre Ayton down there who was clogging up the paint. Scoot Henderson working on his game, not being able to really shoot the ball to the abilities that he's going to be. A Tumani Kamara also on that team, not a great shooter, playing a lot of minutes. Matisse Thybulle, I can keep going. Donovan Clingan. It's clear. The Trailblazers aren't a great three-point shooting team, so they asked him to really help them
lean into that role.
space the floor.
Yeah.
We can see something different here with Boston because they should have a team that tracks as a high leverage three-point shooting team as they've normally been. We have to see what they do without JT. But if he can get to the basket a little bit more and draw a couple more fouls, yes, it could be a real thing that helps Boston win games late in the season and late in games and period.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the layout, especially looking at what Portland had going on versus what he's going to be stepping into with the Boston Celtics, because system is everything. And this system can either propel him or we can just get exactly what he did, copy and paste from Portland. I think that he's in a propelling situation considering the fact that while we want the three-pointers out of him, that doesn't have to be the only asset that he brings to the table.
Right.
So it is important that you lay that out.
Yes. Last thing before we talk about KP, because we got to talk about him.
Figure that out.
You know, I want to talk about what Jrue Holiday is going to do for the Portland Trailblazers. I mean,
is it true that they've been hungry for Holiday for years and years?
You know, obviously he was traded from the Milwaukee Bucks after winning a championship there to Portland. And he basically got there and was like, hey, Portland, I don't want to play here. I don't want to play here. So let me go win a championship, which
he did.
Portland did right by, sending him to Boston. He went on to win a championship. And, you know, now the opportunity, Portland's like, okay, can you be the vet for our young guys? You know, and he finally said, it's sounding like he's saying yes.
Right.
But when you're looking at their team, they're doing things in the right way. People will say, oh, well, why do they do this? This is one of their young stars. Why would they give it up? You know, Anfernee doesn't want to play there. You know, he's been there for a while. He's been a part of losing teams over there for a while.
Like you said, coming straight from high school versus via college or anything else, like, you know, you're a baby. So that was home for him. So for him to be open to going coast to coast from that team says a lot.
Yes. So, you know, he has an opportunity, Jrue, to go over there and lead some of these young guys. They have an opportunity now where they didn't need to take second-round picks because they have young guys who are still trying to figure out if they're NBA players or not. They don't need to add second-round picks into that mix. He has the opportunity to teach Scoot. He has the opportunity to teach Shadon Sharp, Denny Avdija, Tumani Kamara, Donovan Clingan. You know what I mean? These are guys who need some veteran leadership, guys who have won championships to be able to help them get over the hump and figure out how to win games in the NBA. He's going to be their on-court coach for the next couple of years. This is a great deal for them as well. All
right, so quickly as we pivot over to KP, as you put it, who won the deal here? Boston Celtics or Portland Trailblazers?
You know, people are going to hate me because I'm going back to the Luka trade. I said lose. But I just feel like it's a win-win, you know what I mean, situation right here. I think Boston wins because they get a guy who is going to, on a one-year deal, doesn't hold them to the cap. They get a little bit closer to being under that second apron, which they've been wanting and needing to get under. And, you know, if the season doesn't go well, great. You have an asset that you can trade who's on the expiring deal to go to another contending team, right? And say, hey, contending team, give us back blah, 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 young talent that you are not using that we can help mold or whatever Boston wants in that situation. And they can get something back in return for just him being a great player. So it's a win in that sense for Boston, and then for Portland, like I said, they got their champion, a guy who's going to mold their future. Yeah, the Holiday that they have been chasing down for quite some time now. So as we mentioned, a step in the right direction for the Boston Celtics to alleviate some of this financial pain. But we know the other big name that's been on the chopping block, that is Porzingis. Now, walk us through this, Sante, because we're hearing of another potential team trade? Three-team trade.
Whatever we want to call this, in order to get the job done.
You know, we always have to have a graphic just because it's so much to lay out, you know. But ESPN was talking before the Jrue Holiday. They threw out 3 trades that could possibly help the Boston Celtics get under the cap situation that they're dealing with. We're only going to stick with one of them because the other 2 got obliterated by this Jrue Holiday trade. And we're going to talk about trading Kristaps Porzingis. Now, in this deal, the Celtics would get Brandon Clark and center Jay Huff. The Bulls would get Kristaps Porzingis and Xavier Tillman from the Celtics. And then the Grizzlies would receive THT, Taylor Horton-Tucker, in a sign and trade. And center Nikola Vucevic with a second-round pick also added from the Bulls. Casey, what do you think of this deal?
I don't like it that much. And the biggest thing that stuck out to me, because you know that I'm looking at, okay, we just grabbed a guy that's going to add some points, right?
Yeah.
But since everyone has harped on the fact that he doesn't offer anything defensively, then you kind of want a player that's can, you know, level up a little bit, contribute a few points, but at least fit the identity of how strong the Boston Celtics are defensively.
Yeah.
When I looked at Brandon Clark and saw all of the injuries, I'm like, no.
You're out.
I'm no, thank you.
Yeah.
We're already playing Nostradamus with the Jason Tatum injury with high hopes and perspective. That's one thing.
Yeah.
Now, if the injuries weren't piling up, he was a guy that was helping with them having a more successful defensive rating. This is a Grizzlies team that started off pretty well defensively and then just kind of started to decline and fall through the pipeline.
Right.
We won't get into all that. Then you come to Jay Huff, and he's part of that defensive identity that started off strong and kind of started to fall through, but probably is just good enough to fit in.
Yes.
But I don't need one player that might be good enough in this three-way bargain, funneling system that I already mentioned. So that's where you really just kind of pump the brakes on the hesitation. Like, I can't go back and look at your best numbers being 2-3 seasons ago. I need to see what you did this year. And yeah, it's nobody's fault to fall upon these injuries.
Yeah.
But why would we make a trade? Why would we give away an asset? Or why wouldn't we get anything back in return that can help this roster now and today? Now that we know that we're not blowing anything up and we're clearly not passing on a postseason. We're still making an effort.
Yeah, clearly. What I do like about this deal is that Xavier Tillman has been kind of a negative asset for the Boston Celtics up until now. They haven't used him to his full potential for whatever reason that is. He would end up going back to, I think, Memphis is getting him. I don't know. There's a lot of different places. The Bulls are getting him. The Bulls are getting him this time. Memphis is involved with the trade. We got him from the Memphis Grizzlies beforehand. But, either way, he hasn't really worked out for the Boston Celtics, right? So you're taking him and you're saying, okay, it's really KP for these two players that they're getting back. Brandon Clark, injuries, yes. But when he is healthy, I played against him in college. I mean, this dude is
a pain.
Athletic, defensive monster, rebounder. He's one of those guys, a lot like a Draymond Green, that plays bigger than his frame. You know what I mean? He feels like he's 6'11", you know what I mean? Even though he's more like 6'8", you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's kind of how he plays. And then when you talk about a Jay Huff, if we're thinking about losing Luke Kornet during this offseason because we can't afford him, you're going to need somebody who comes in and gives that Luke Kornet energy and that spark plug. Jay Huff could be one of those guys. He's done a lot of the same career path that Luke Kornet went through. G League guy, found his way to try to, be a solid NBA player. With Memphis last year, he finally found his way to being a solid NBA player. And, in 11 minutes, he's scoring 7 points a game. You know what I'm saying? So that's spark plug energy. He has some defensive prowess, like you were saying. I think he could be a little bit better as a defender. He wasn't really asked to do that for the Memphis Grizzlies. We would see if, this trade were to happen.
Yeah.
How great he would be. But, I don't like this trade as a whole. I'm out on it as well.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be hard to get rid of that KP contract. So anything to get out of the second eight.
It is. And, for the most part, until seeing this, some of the packaging that I was seeing was obviously KP with Hauser somewhere potentially. Or now, because this came out kind of after the fact, they could use those two down the line, second-round draft picks, package that with KP, and try to do something better. Nothing against Brandon Clark, like I said. When you look at the numbers fully healthy, you're impressed.
He's a dog.
But the injury being this year, it's just kind of too close to home, and we already have a question mark with Brown coming off of surgery, JT being out, and you just need spark plugs that you can count on if we're not calling it a wash, which we're not. So 100%. That was the biggest reason of me passing on that. But look, we still have to figure out what this roster is going to look like, and it's not all about the trades. It's not all about 3 blockbuster trades or teams or whatever the case may be. It goes down with the NBA draft, which we've alluded to for a week now, finally about to be upon us. So stick with us here on Hold My Banner as we break down an NBA draft preview and see how the Boston Celtics can continue to level up here on Hold My Banner on the other side of this quick break. Casey Hudson and Ante Campbell here. And as we mentioned, trades might answer some questions, but it also brings us to the question of how does this going to have us re-engineer the draft approach for the Boston Celtics, which brings us to a little bit of a draft preview. We've had some great guests on last week to kind of give us perspective on if the Boston Celtics tried to make a jump, where that sweet spot would be somewhere around, 13, 14, 15. But it's also been mentioned that this is a really talented draft, so you really don't have to do any of this magicianing to get a quality player that would be NBA ready as of now. Ante, with the movement, with the Jrue Holiday trade, with the conversations of the other pieces that the Boston Celtics can potentially move on from, how have you kind of reevaluated this upcoming draft?
I mean, I think it's kind of landing back to where I've always been. We need bigs.
Centers.
I think bigs are important for this draft. We talked about KP in the last segment, just how, losing him could, shape what this team is going to look like. I didn't even get into it, but I would love to see them trade KP to the Pelicans for Trey Murphy, which is a wing. So I know a lot of people are out here saying that the Warriors are interested, the Pelicans are interested. If somehow we can get Trey Murphy back in the deal, I'm not saying 1-to-1, but for KP, that would be a nice pick, but that still leaves us empty with the bigs. Assuming that Al Horford's going to say, hey, thanks, I'm going to go try
I'm tired.
Right, I'm going to go try to win this somewhere else. Assuming that Luke Cornett is going to say, hey, I was on a 1-year prove-it deal. I had a great year. I'm going to go get paid now. Thank you very much, Boston, for the championship.
Yeah.
That leaves you with an Xavier Tillman, who we talked about, Neemias Queta, some bigs that the Celtics are, I wouldn't say super ecstatic about. You know what I mean? Nimi is a great player, and I think they do have high hopes for him, but not as high hopes to be their starting center. So if you're looking at a team that needs to figure out the big spot, I feel like there's some guys in this draft that could help them do that.
Yeah, that's true. And to add to some of the teams that KP is reportedly being shopped with, it's Brooklyn Nets, obviously, just because of the amount of pieces and draft picks and all the things that they can just break down and ship off. Los Angeles Lakers in need of a center. That conversation is starting to circulate.
I did see that the Lakers are out. Right before we got on.
Okay.
I did see that, they're kind of out. That was one report. It's just one. But
I almost made a dig saying that West Coast decisiveness, that checks out. The Detroit Pistons, young talent needing support. Utah Jazz interested in him previously. That could come back to the table. But you're right. And here's the other thing. With those great interviews that we had last week, with the list that is circulated, about 5 names have kind of stuck around for the Boston Celtics to potentially be looking at and eyeing for this NBA draft. 3 of the 5 being centers, unless this Boston Celtics team wants to add to the guard situation. So now, you mentioned the big guy, but would you lean in another direction, and for whom?
No. Honestly, no. Now that we have Simons here, I trust in their ability to build around him and Peyton Pritchard as their starting and backup point guard, with the Derek White obviously intermingling in some point guard duties for this team. And obviously Jaylen Brown's going to bring the ball up as well. So I'm kind of good on the whole guard situation, at least draft-wise, because they don't need projects. They need guys who are ready to help them win and play games right now.
Yeah.
A lot of people bring up when you talk about at least guards or wings in this draft, with that 28th pick, they're talking about Noah Penda. And that was a name that I believe, Fran had me write down. He's like, hey, write this kid's name down, And
you added that for some reason, the French market right now is just super hot. So it lines up. Continue.
Yeah, so, and he's a 6'8", wing, tracks as a small forward guard, really in this draft. But the issues that I see with his game is that he can't create his own shot, which is, people talk about the playmaking. He's a great passer, but he's not a real, really able to put the ball on the deck and make things happen. He gets stripped a lot. He has turnovers doing that, so his handles aren't really there. I know JB has struggled with his handles, but, I'm not really into that for a young prospect right now who doesn't show me the upside that JB showed me as a prospect. Then he's not a great shooter. He's only made under a third of the threes that he's attempted throughout, so
that
he's
doesn't scream plug and play.
Right, he's under 33% from shooting, and then defensively, he's not that athletic. You know what I mean? Like he has a ability to switch, but when you're talking about athleticism, it's not really there. He doesn't even finish above the rim a lot of times on his drives to the basket. That makes me nervous for a guy this young. I'm kind of out on Noah Penda. Yeah,
well, it sounds like he's going to need a little bit more attention. And another question that we asked John Fanta was, how many of these players are going to be NBA ready when the draft is done, you get to your team, you get situated, because there are a handful of teams out there that need their NBA prospects to be ready to pivot into their roster almost immediately. And again, if we're not washing, which we're not here, then we need a guy who's going to plug and play. You can't be worried about him, and you can't be worried about multiple players new to your roster and their defensive ability. Again, you got to fit that systematically here for the Boston Celtics, in my personal opinion. So I'm with you on that. But if you're pivoting away from that name, is there another name that jumps off the board at you?
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things of it's going to be a situation of who's available. I think at the end of the day, it might end up being somebody that we're not even paying attention to right now. You know, last year no one was shouting for Baylor Shireman to be a Boston Celtic, and now he's shown flashes that he could be a really good draft pick for them. You know, it could be one of those situations as well. I trust Brad Stevens wholly in this, you know, in this era. But it's the names that keep coming up. Like you said, there's 5. I'm going to talk about 3 of the bigs: Maxime Reynaud, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Danny Wolf. You know, and it's really going to be who's available, depending on the draft, mock draft, the boards, whatever you look at. You know, all 3 of them can kind of be around that 28 range.
Yes.
You know, I haven't seen Danny Wolf get that far back. I've seen him as far back as 26, but that's the guy that I have been shouting the praises of, just because of his ability to put the ball on the deck, his ability to play as a cutter, be in space, and his ability to make shots off the dribble.
Right.
Which tracks for me that eventually he's going to become a great still shooter. The free throw numbers make you a little nervous about his touch, but I think this is a kid that can figure it out. Now, if you're talking about a more pro-ready, 2-day, kind of fit the need of what the Celtics need, it's Ryan Kalkbrenner. And the reason is he's older. I mean, by the time they play their first game, he's months away from being 24, you know.
He's a man.
But, you know, my issue with Ryan is, you know, the three-point shooting hasn't been at volume. I've seen it in spurts a little bit here and there, but he hasn't shot it at a high clip. He's a great defender, but he can't switch. You know, he's a great shot blocker. The rebounding numbers aren't where they should be at. Those 2 things make me nervous. If you're going to be a big in this system, you know, the Celtics struggled when they were in drop coverage. They were the best when they were able to switch when KP was at his best. They could play him at the 5. Al Horford at his best, they play him at the 5, and they could switch 1 through 5 and say, hey, come at us. When Nemi came in, when Luke Cornett came in, the defense started to slouch a little bit, but the good thing about those 2 dudes is they rebound.
Right.
Can Ryan do that? That's a little nerve-wracking for me early in this progression. And then Reynaud from Stanford, I mean, this kid, he would probably be my second option if it's not Danny Wolf. I mean, he shot 45% on catch and shoot threes this year, and he's shooting 5 a game, you know. So if I'm getting that kind of consistent production out of him in the NBA jersey, we're talking about 3 7-footers here. So you can, there, you know what I mean? These are 3 7-footers we're talking about. So defensively, they're going to be able to, you know, do some things and block some shots and do other things that the guys my size wouldn't be able to do. So, you know, having him here would be the best option. Also kind of a slow-footed, not really good in the switch, kind of a drop big. Instead of being up there at the level of the screen, he has to fall back and kind of see everything in front of him. You know, they're not going to be perfect. This is the 28th pick that we're talking about.
Well, I was going to say, because considering school, considering conference, considering like where they went in their basketball career at college, like sometimes I feel like it's hard to navigate how they're going to translate to the NBA, because we talk about Ryan now. What you mentioned is keying, because that's probably how he's going to fall down to a 28-32 spot for the Celtics to be able to pick up. But needing him to shoot more, needing to see more threes out of him, needing to see more rebounds out of him, if the system provides for it and asks for it and needs that, is the capability seem like it's there? Because sometimes it's hard to see it in their school programs.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You know, college basketball does not track well for what NBA basketball is going to look like. It gives you a glimpse, but that's why they do these workouts. That's why they pay attention to what these kids wear in high school, because that more mirrors.
You're going to have to bridge it.
Right, it more mirrors what the NBA game looks like. That's why a lot of these, you know, these European products are coming in and doing well, because they've played professional basketball. What professional basketball is more like. And it's not one-to-one, but it's a lot closer than it is in the college game. I think something that I do want to know before we get out of here is that, you know, with these picks, you know, financial situations do come into play. You know, with the 28th pick comes with some guaranteed money. And the Celtics don't need to be adding money to the books right now. You know, so when you're talking about a 32nd pick, I think they should trade out of it as a whole. You know, I don't think
so.
You're
Definitely against them trying to trade up in any sense.
I mean, trading up, you know, financially, that's where it gets dicey, right? How much can they get under the second apron with this KP trade? If they do trade to Sam Hauser, those are going to come into play with this. But, you know, if they're not going to get super far under that bridge, you know, then I'm out on the trading up as a whole.
Yeah.
But they definitely, I feel like, should be trading out of the 32nd pick because they can get value for that for a guy that they might end up waiving, like Watson, like I was talking about earlier.
True. Good point, actually. Didn't think of the financial side of all of this, but they can save themselves, put a little bit of a cushion, and still grab a prospect. But look, the other reason prospects are important, the NBA draft is important, trades are important, it's to get you to a championship. So we're going to talk about some too early to tell potential champions for next year. Don't go anywhere. Hang with Ante and myself here on Hold My Banner on the other side of this quick break. Welcome back into Hold My Banner. Now, as you can see here, OKC are the 2024-25 NBA champions. And with all due respect, I accidentally skirted right past it as we opened up the show, which is rude on my part. I was taught better than that. So call it now. Who's winning the NBA championship next season? You know what? We all, as a whole, society-wise, we are known for not letting the paint dry.
Yeah, Legion Hoops was ready for that one.
Like, the paint cannot even dry. The knitter didn't even finish putting on the numbers for the new banner for this team to raise eventually in the beginning of the season, because we know we like to hold all of the antics for opening night, or what you call it for NBA. So, yes. Okay, let's jump ahead. After I give OKC their flowers, congratulations. We knew that this was going to be coming out. You and I both thought they were going to seal the deal in Game 6. Pacers making it exciting, pushing it to 7.
Yep.
And here we are talking about OKC and who's going to challenge them for their kingdom next season. Where did your mind immediately jump to for this conversation?
Well, you know, first, yes, respect to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Congratulations. You won the NBA championship. No one can take that away from you.
Never.
I want to pay respects to Tyrese Halliburton. I hope that he has a speedy recovery. I hope that he's doing well today. You know, that's a tough situation. And, you know, I just pray that he comes back to be the player that we all know and love him to be, you know what I mean?
100%.
And, you know, next season without him is going to be a little bit weird. So, you know, hopefully he's able to come back and just be that top tier all-star guard that we all hope that he can be. So shout out to you, Tyrese. Hope you're doing well. Now, where my mind is going for this way too early. 2026 NBA championship picks. You want me to start with my number one?
No, I want you to start with your number. Actually, yes. We're gonna.
Okay, we'll do the top 5.
Yeah.
You want me to start with 5 or 1?
No. Start with your number 1.
Okay, I'll start with my number 1. So number 1, I'm going to give respect to the Thunder. Yeah, the Thunder won it this year. This is the team that, you know, is the second youngest team in NBA history to win an NBA championship. Funny thing is, Bill Walton, 1977, was the youngest team to win one and was the first team to win the technically Larry O'Brien trophy. So shout out to them as well. That's just a fun fact. But yeah, the OKC Thunder are in a prime position to keep this team together, to have their coach together. They have, you know, great continuity as players. They like each other, which is a huge
they're a
part
family.
of winning a championship and playing this deep into the season. 2 Game 7s that they played in throughout this run. This team is a team that's only going to get better as the season goes on through next year. They have guys like Nikola Topic, who was a number 12 pick for them, who they're really excited about, who didn't play this year at all. Ooh. They have guys in the wings. They have 4 first-round draft picks. We're talking about the draft, you know what I mean, this next year. So they're a team that only continues to get richer. They will have another opportunity to win a championship next year, bar health.
I think this is the only spot where you and I are lockstep. No, it's one of 2 where we are lockstep. But I agree with everything you just said, on top of the fact that their vibes are screaming, we're just getting started. And so add that to what you mentioned and the fact that they have the young talent to add into the mix. And look, you start developing them at the right time. You give them their reps early on in the season and know exactly when you got to start getting hot. Then, yeah, you're looking at going back to that number 1 spot. Yeah. And the youth is on their side in equal measure of the talent.
Keep it rolling. Give me number 2.
Bump into 2, Cavs. I'm going to just make this easy on my part. I had the Cavs being the biggest challenge for the Celtics last year. They forced the Celtics to pass a lot more. They were disruptive, at least early on in the season. I thought that they were going to kind of continue to swing past a number of teams. That fell short, but you still have the capability there in terms of your roster. So, look, it's one of those things. Make adjustments, make those cleanups, and then come back and compete. So I have them in 2.
Yeah, I have them in 2 as well. I'm a little nervous with the fact that they're making a big jump financially for Evan Mobley. This is the start of his extension year, which means they are, we want to talk about second aprons. This team is way over that second apron. And they don't have Ty Jerome technically on roster yet this year. He was the second best 6-man. Obviously, Peyton Pritchard won it this year, and a lot of people in Cleveland had an issue with that. They thought Ty Jerome should have won 6-man of the year. So this is a guy who's a really good player for them. They have to figure out what they're going to do with that, what they're going to do with this new influx of money. Is their ownership just going to say, hey, we're just going to roll this year and figure it out, or are they going to, try to make some moves? We're going to have to see. But I still got them in the 2 spot. 3 for me is the Denver Nuggets. When you're talking about continuity, that's just been kind of the list for me. Teams that are older, that have been together, that have won at a high level before. This Nuggets team was right there. They took the Thunder to 7. They could have been holding up this Larry O'Brien trophy if things bounced a little differently for them, right? They had some injuries. They had a new head coach who was already a part of their staff, but they've locked him in now. They have the second best player, top 3, whatever, best player in the world, whatever you want to call Jokic. They have him a top player in the world on their team that always gives you an outside chance of winning the championship. So I'm going to give them the 3 spot.
Yeah, I can't go against that. I guess it's just the mere fact that, continuity, I love how that's a theme for you. It just seems like when I see NBA, everybody's just trying to do one of those superstar splashes to some degree. But I wanted to go back to the fact that, chemistry matters. And chemistry should be more important than, landing a superstar and messing up all of your aprons, whatever the kitchen talk may be. I got the Rockets at 3. Woo. I know.
We'll talk about them in a second.
It was a little steep, and I'll let you have the soapbox for it, but it's just the mere fact that KD, when healthy, is one of those guys that can just level up a situation all on his own and not going to put it all on him, but you also just have the caliber of somebody who can lead this team, some of those younger guys that are in the mix and kind of probably help level them up as well. So just kind of went off the deep end with that one, probably floating the hype of the trade. I'll give it that, but I slotted in the Rockets at 3.
I'll accept that. I have them at 4.
Not too bad.
So I am high on this, this trade, and we'll talk more about it in a second. But all of the things that you said are completely correct. I won't even challenge you on that. Let's just go.
You're saving the challenge for the later. I know it.
Let's just go to your number 4. Who's your number 4?
Timberwolves.
Okay.
And it's because when you get this close and when you're one of the best defensive teams in the league and you know that you have to make adjustments this big, just freaking figure out how to get your offense more involved. And they're not as crippled as a number of teams in the NBA, so they don't have to do a whole bunch of big splashy movement. Get somebody who can add some points, stay stout defensively, come back and stop being the team that's so close with no cigar. I'm so tired of that being their theme, and it's not just because of my love for Minnesota. It's because when you see them get that close, when you see the promised land right there and they fall short because they lean too heavily in one direction over another, I need them to capitulate on everything at this point. Yeah,
they're actually a team that's been in cap hell, like we like to call it, but they're actually losing money going into next year. I mean, they have to figure out if they're going to bring back Shea's cousin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. If they're going to bring him back, then, obviously they have to figure out if that's going to add or, whatever. They have to figure that whole situation out for their team.
Some pivoting to bring in.
Exactly. But continuity, like you said, is big. This team, was a team that we tracked. I think Travis even said he thought that the Timberwolves were going to the NBA championship, and that they could win it. I think at one point he said that, it's been so long since I talked to Travis, but, that's so this team.
Did you notice this is my seat now?
Yeah, it's yours. You claimed it. This team is led by Anthony Edwards, and, what you saw out of Julius Randle this last playoff run was inspiring. He had terrible playoff runs with the Knicks, and everyone let him hear about it. But now with the Minnesota Timberwolves, he's been a guy. Against the Thunder, it was a little shaky at the end. But the first couple rounds, he was doing what he was supposed to do, and that's inspiring. So I got them at my 5 seed, actually.
Okay. See, they at least they made the cut. They made the list. Should I drop my 5?
Yeah, let me hear it. I'm nervous now. What are you going to bring to me?
How about the Pacers?
No, oh, my God. Without Hallie?
Without Halliburton.
With the Halliburton?
Without Halliburton.
What's
Halliburton. Yes, I did go there because here's the thing. They've got 5 free agents hitting the market this summer. One guy that they need to say, hello, thank you for your service, goodbye, is Tony Bradley.
Yeah.
Didn't love his numbers in the postseason, and when you're talking about other guys that stepped up, his name was never in the conversation. So if you're talking about the opportunity to move on from 5 players, you need somebody who's going to come in and pack numbers that Halliburton will not be there to deliver. They don't have to do too much. If anybody's picking up on what I'm saying the most here is if you don't have to do too much, hope is on your side. That's why I'm going back to the Pacers, just because of what their free agency conversation looks like this summer. Yes, the energy that Halliburton brings to the table is going to be severely missed, but he's shown that he's also a vocal leader. What did we do the minute that JT went down? We hung his jersey in the locker room and we played our hearts out for them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a number of these players are going to want to get that back for him as well. Not to mention is that I loved the step up of a number of guys on this team. Sir Benedict, come back in hot. Then you've got Siakam, continue to pack that punch. Like, there's guys here that can fill that void. And again, plug and play. You don't have to go crazy after you move on from the names that did nothing for you in this postseason.
Yeah, you have to question, though, with Tyrese going down, will they actually bring back Miles Turner? You know what I'm saying? That's a big question. So, you know, they got to figure that out. I'm not that high on the Pacers, especially without Tyrese. I mean, we saw what they looked like in Game 7.
I don't think you were high on Tyrese to begin with, though. So you weren't going to add to my confetti on this by any means. But you were kind to me. I was expecting a little bit more bite.
You know, I'm just sad for Tyrese. That's all.
Yeah,
sad for Tyrese.
you can use that one. All right. So Timberwolves were your 5. Did I jump over your 4?
No. 4, I ran Rockets. I was right there with you. I said Rockets 4, just like you. Timberwolves are 5.
Just making sure, because I just keep skirting past all kinds of things today. But yes, we are thinking of Halliburton. Also, he did take to Twitter to share his feelings. I'm not sure if you caught that, but love the transparency. Love getting inside the mind of the athlete sometimes, because George put it perfectly. We're so quick to hit all the cliches versus like the reality of his approach to this journey ahead of him and how he's going to bounce back. But regardless, I think that he's still going to be a vocal leader for this team that really showed up and showed out. They pushed it to 7. They were underestimated a number of ways, and this is exactly what you're going to see as we get ready to pivot into the offseason fully and then an upcoming exciting season. More in the NBA, we got to talk about this Kevin Durant trade and what it means per se, and if I'm crazy for putting the Rockets at 3 or if Ante has them too low at 4, who knows? It just means go nowhere. Stick with us here on Hold My Banner on the other side of this quick break. All right, last rally here on Hold My Banner. Casey Hudson with Ante Campbell, breaking down all things from the Jrue Holiday trade that broke last night. Talked about it at the top of the segment. Then we had to get into some NBA draft conversation. Then we got some too early to tell in terms of what can go down for the championship conversation next season. But within that conversation, we mentioned a team by the name of the Rockets, right? The Phoenix Suns received Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick in this year's draft, and received 5 second-round picks. Madness. But Kevin Durant is now a Houston Rocket. What did you make when this news broke?
Look, immediately I say, finally, because Rockets fans, you know, Halliburton fans aren't happy with me. Rockets fans hate me.
They got a dartboard with your face on it.
Because I am the bearer of that news. I told them in freaking January that their team wasn't going to make it out of the first round, and I was completely right. For the reasons that I'm happy about this trade.
Okay.
They went and found the alpha. A lot of people were upset with Jalen Green and his ability to grow while he's been a Houston Rocket. He hasn't shown that much progression from a year-to-year basis. This year, they were hoping that he would do it. He had that huge game against the Warriors in like game 3 or 4 or whatever that helped them propel them to some energy. And then other than that, he was a nobody throughout the entire series, you know? So they were upset with that. And then when you look at Dylan Brooks, I think that his time and his antics and all that other stuff kind of ran its course.
Yeah, water out.
You know, and Houston saying, okay, once again, another situation where we don't need second-round picks. We have a treasure trove of young talent. We have a top 4 pick that everyone would have tasked as a, you know, Rookie of the Year. I had him as my Rookie of the Year going into the season. Not play, you know what I mean? Dropping 50 in G League games like it was nothing, you know what I'm saying? With Reed Shepherd. So if you have that on your team, you have guys that are ready to play that can't find minutes, then fine, trade in 2 for 1 and getting the guy that we know, okay, end of the game, who's the ball going to? Kevin Durant. Anybody got any problems with that? No? Good.
Right.
I love that.
Along the side of anybody having any problems with that, like time on the court comes up, and then like how does this impact the development of these young players? Thompson and Smith Jr. being two in the conversation. But the reality of it is when you know you can count on KD, you don't have to overwork his minutes either. You know what you're going to get and the time frame that you're going to get it. So I think that it brings a balance to still being able to develop young talent as well as incorporate a key component that you know can shoot off as long as health stays on his side. Your thoughts on his impact to this roster?
I mean, immediately, I just think of all the young guys that I was talking about. Jabari Smith is going to be able to elevate his game under KD. When you talk about Tari Eason, another wing that they have the opportunity to learn, he has the opportunity to teach and give opportunities to be a better player for. I just think he opens up everything that they were trying to do. This team was a defensive-headed monster. Besides Alperen Sengun, you have defensive identity with Fred. You have a defensive identity with Amen Thompson, Tari Eason, Jabari Smith, Steven Adams. All of these guys come in and they're focused on stopping the guy in front of them. That's what they feel like their job is to do every night. Now you have two dudes, Alperen Sengun and the KD, who can play off each other. And a guy with KD, like, he can fit into any offense. What offense can he fit in? He doesn't need the ball to do this every single play. He is great in ISO, but he can also just play off of others and watch. He's cool with that, and that's what's going to be great about him being in Houston.
All right, closing arguments. How do you feel about what the Sun received out of this trade?
Yeah, you know, I think Jalen Green is a great player. I don't see him pairing up well with Devin Booker. I have issues with that. I love them getting back Dylan Brooks in this deal because I do think they need a 3-and-D guy to add alongside a guy like Ryan Dunn. Can treat Ryan and teach him how to, you know, be a better 3-and-D guy than he already is. And then the picks. The picks give them opportunities to finally get off of that Bradley Beal deal. It's been a horrible deal. It didn't work out. You need to add it and sweeten the deal, just like we talk about KP, but they needed 5 second-round picks to try to
correct that mistake.
100%.
Yeah, so for the most part, without getting too crazy, it almost does balance out to a win-win situation considering what you just mentioned there. We'll see how the attitudes, behavior, and skill set lines up for the Phoenix Suns. But more importantly, it's a wrap for Ante and myself here. As we mentioned, Jrue Holiday, more than likely, I mean, it's not officially official, but it's official. Heading out to Portland, we'll see what other moves come down the pipeline for the Boston Celtics. And until next time, guys, we'll see you here on Hold My Banner.